All right, we are going to jump into our new part of the event here, and that's our Industry Advisors panel. Um, as I mentioned earlier, I'm absolutely just delighted at the panelists who agreed to participate today. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start first with Chris Wood, is a recognized leader in OTT and digital media transformation with more than 40 enterprise video platforms delivered. Chris leads Spicy Mango, a London-based technology vendor serving sports, media, entertainment, and broadcast organizations worldwide. Spicy Mango combines deep industry expertise with forward-thinking innovation, and together Chris and his team deliver transformative solutions that enhance content distribution, reshape processes, and align technology with strategic business objectives. Please welcome Chris. So, Chris, since you're first, you get to choose. You can either sit on the other side. You can sit here next to me.
I'll take this.
Perfect. All right. Next is Julian Wright, who founded Blue Lucy with a vision to challenge the orthodoxies on the implementation of software in media operations with a focus on the rapid delivery of measurable business outcomes. Blue Lucy develops software that enables media companies to take control of their operations. They work with some of the industry's leading names, delivering business value by integrating media and business systems, automating workflows, and surfacing operational data. Julian? All right, you're going to balance this out. I appreciate it. All right. The next person I'm going to bring up, we joke because we live 4 miles apart and we only see each other in far off places around the world. So Andy Beach is a technology strategist, advisor, and author specializing in AI, media, and digital transformation. As former CTO of media and entertainment at Microsoft, he led innovations in cloud production and AI-driven workflows. He now advises emerging companies like FlickForge and Slinkit, and writes on AI's impact on media. A frequent industry speaker, Andy provides thought leadership on AI-enhanced content creation and serves on the Alliance for Media and Entertainment Board. Please welcome Andy Beach. All right. All right. Next, we have Mark Peters. Mark brings over 25 years of leadership in the media industry, driving complex initiatives from large-scale streaming platform builds and satellite transformations to operational streamlining and mergers and acquisitions. His expertise spans the entire content supply chain, from live and file contribution workflows to broadcast and app-based distribution. Mark is managing partner at CMOS Trango LLC, a boutique advisory firm that partners with the leading media and communications operators to shape and execute critical strategic initiatives across streaming and broadcast, cable and satellite, machine automations, and M&A. Please welcome Mark Peters. And finally, Thierry Fautier is a Silicon Valley veteran. As Vice President of Video Strategy at Harmonic, he drove innovation standards and strategic partnerships. He's an active contributor. Oh, of course, I have to drop my notes. Thank you. He's an active contributor in the industry, having founded and chaired the Ultra HD Forum, co-chaired the Streaming Video Alliance VR Group, and co-founded the VR Industry Forum. He also won a Technical Emmy Award for his work on AI optimization applied to real-time video compression. Thierry is co-founder, managing director, and lead business strategist at the Media League, a business consulting agency in the media and entertainment technology space. Thierry? So in these bios, you think we're probably going to talk a little bit about AI at some point. All right. So I want to start out and I want to talk a little bit about industry trends. And I specifically want to start with innovation. Julian, I'll start with you. Blue Lucy's post NAB wrap-up summarized your observations from conversations that you had with your customers really well. It said, innovation still matters, but it must be grounded in usability, agility, and value. Could you share with us some of the examples of technical innovation that helps customers achieve those goals? And maybe what's an example of technical innovation that we hear a lot about that doesn't actually deliver usability, agility, and value that customers need?
I'll just speak here. It's a very interesting question. I think it's not so much about the technology per se. I think you could find examples of any technology that has delivered value and has not delivered value. It's much more about the approach, focus on business outcomes. I don't think that there's many technologies that survive very long that are intrinsically there's anything intrinsically wrong with them. They just don't survive. So it's more about the implementation and approach. I think one of the issues that I see in our industry over the last 25, 30 years is we do kind of follow the technology quite a lot. Technology is very cool, and people buy into a technology being cool and sort of follow it round, rather than looking at the business value. I think that's something that's very much more in focus, increasingly so, as the financial pressures that we all see. So yeah, I think the answer is any technology can be good and bad. It's really about the implementation and focus on the business value. And then during the implementation, checkpoints. Is this project delivering value? Is this the right technology? Keep checking, keep checking, keep checking. So yeah, there's no good technology, bad technology. There's good implementations and bad implementations. And I don't just mean about the project approach. I mean about the business approach. Why are we doing this? What's the objective? So there's a nice woolly answer for you. If it's not about the technology, it's about the implementation and collaborative implementation. So that's why we're here, I guess.
Indeed. Thank you. I'm going to stay on that side of the room. Mark, let's talk a little bit about maybe in-house tech development. A friend of mine at one of the world's biggest streaming services recently told me that as a focus on his company's, their focus on profitability, he said, we finally recognize that we're an entertainment company, not a technology company. What are you hearing from your clients about how they're evaluating whether to trade in-house tech development and sometimes technical debt for commercial solutions? And then maybe more broadly, what is your guidance to those clients and to the vendor community here in the room?
Yeah, very interesting question. So I sit in a lot of intake meetings with my clients when they're sort of having this exact debate and this discussion, and maybe they will spawn an investigation or a study into build versus buy. I think one of what we're seeing more recently in those conversations and in that analysis is that in the reality, a lot of publishers or networks that have invested in their digital platforms are sort of now approaching really the end of that generation of those initial digital platforms that got them to market with a direct-to-consumer offering. And now it's time looking through the refresh. What do we now do? Well, of course, when it comes to the build decision, the reality is that we always figured, a few years, 5 to 7 years was sort of the life cycle. We heard from the Devoncroft guys this morning that their studies are saying in reality, some of these technologies that are in-house built end up having to support 10 to 15 years. And do you really want to enter that journey? Do you really want to get onto and invest in a technology stack that you're going to have to maintain for that duration of time? And here's the real differentiator. Do you feel that as an organization, and this is a conversation that we have, and this is the advice that we give, do you think that it's worth building because you can extract incremental business value as you maintain and update that particular platform or that piece of software? Because the cost of the in-house team to maintain it is one thing. So to offset that, you have to be pretty sure that you can squeeze out incremental business value. And so you have to be pretty sure that over that lifespan that you have a whole plethora and a whole roadmap of exciting features. Whereas in reality, for a lot of more commoditized, the nuts and bolts of delivering the video service, it just often doesn't make sense. And do you really want to be an expert in that versus an expert in something that perhaps is a little bit differentiating and is really really critical to your direct-to-consumer experience or to your customer's experience?
Thank you. That ties in really well with what Julian was saying. Two sides of the same coin, I think. I'm going to stay on that side of the room. Thierry, you recently did an interview with Jan Ozer at Mile High Video, and you talked about solutions marketing. And I think that really aligns well with the purpose of this event and kind of our overall theme about better together. How would you say solutions marketing, solutions selling, and solutions support, how does that resonate with your clients, and what does it mean for the vendor community?
So first of all, I've been educated like a Russian style at Harmonic. When I came, I never touched a head end in my life, and I was a cheap guy moving to a solution system company. And we had a bunch of product managers who were all experts in encoding, multiplexing, and all kind of horizontal domain. And the secret of success was to have solution people who had nothing to do with product, but had to do with sales enablement. And basically, it's a matrix organization. I know some companies hate to talk about matrix organization, but I can give you a living example of how with 3 people in my team, we managed to grow from $0 to $100 million. 3 people, okay? Not a Mexican army of pre-sales, post-sales. This exists, but there are no domain expertise. So if I have to give one advice to anybody in the room who is trying to sell technology, don't think product, because this is easy. Think customer. This is difficult. And of course, what go with it is ecosystem integration. And I can show you my scars. I've done IPTV and OTT and UHD. If you don't talk to your partners, I know a lot of them smiling in the room, you will fail. Even the big Microsoft who wanted to do new things, new device, new codec, they failed. Look where they are today. They are in the niche of reselling OpenAI. I'm a bit provocative, but I'm French. So.
I kind of wish I was in the business of reselling OpenAI.
For sure. Yeah, I share those IPTV scars from early on. I was a customer with an IPTV head end in the very, very early days. So I'm going to turn to Andy. So Andy, when we had the Slido up there, one of the terms that came up a lot on biggest challenges was cost reduction. So I'm going to go there. You also posted a really interesting insight earlier this year about a finding from the 8th annual Bitmovin Video Developer Report. And you said, the focus has shifted from cost cutting to creating new revenue streams, whether through smarter ad placement, companion apps, or commerce to content integration. So I'm curious, does that mean now that the industry has achieved all of the cost cutting and profitability goals over the past 2 years, or is there more work to be done?
There's always more nickels that can be squeezed out. What I meant was that stopped being the main message. So like 2 years ago at NAB, because this was the NAB report that you had, 2 years ago, everybody just wanted to talk about saving money. That was it, period. Last year or earlier this year, the biggest difference was that was table stakes. There had to be new revenue, new eyeballs, something new that came to it as part of that. And in particular, when I talked about that, a lot of it was around the AI solutions, because the first 3 years of generative AI, a lot of the conversations were, we're not going to deploy it until we figure out how to save money with it as well. Like we're either cutting heads or we're making more content or we're doing something that's different. It's pivoted now to being less about that. It's a much softer message, and it's a lot more around how do I go attract a broader market with the features that I'm investing in.
Okay, perfect. Chris, I want to transition to sports a little bit here. So sports content seems to be pretty bulletproof for revenue generation and subscriber retention. And it's not just live sports content. There are a lot of examples of sports rights owners that have been very successful retaining subscribers and monetizing fan engagement. What innovations do you think are most likely to reshape how fans experience live sports in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think if you'd have asked this question 12, 24 months ago, 3 years ago, the answer would have probably been VR from most people, right? That notion of immersion. And for those of you that have spent any time at the COSM experience in Los Angeles, right, that immersive stadium where you're on a on a bench seat with your beer and the 50-foot screen, that immersion stuff works really well. I think the next 3 years, right, this buzzword that's starting to come out is this hyper personalization. But when you look at fundamentally what this is, right, I mean, it needs a lot of spend. There's a cost cutting angle that we're all still talking about. So are we going to go down that route of hyper personalization when we're trying to save money and pare back? I think we also still have a 1 to 99 problem. And I'll try to give you an analogy. I'm a massive motor racing fan. I'm a motorsport fan. So you look at F1 with multi-view and multi-camera angles and all the stuff that they're doing, and there's a trajectory there where they can get towards personalized highlight reels and being able to go build that on the fly, right? Imagine that sort of TikTok style experience where I'm just getting highlights or clips rapid fired at me and I'm kind of scrolling through those. And I think for some of the bigger providers, the 1%, right? There's that sort of trajectory to get there. For the 99%, by contrast, let's look at World Endurance. I go to Le Mans every year and that kind of stuff. World Endurance, I get a simulcast feed piped at me from broadcast, squeezed down to a mobile phone with graphics that I then can't read, and I get a full event replay. So like the gap is huge, right? And I think in 3 years, I mean, everybody wants an 8-ball, right? I'm not sure I could actually come up with something as an innovation because it'll either just get thrown away in 2 to 3 years and it won't be a thing anymore, right? As all these things are, But I'd like to see the gap close a little bit. I'd like to see other services starting to adopt more than just an OTT proposition being in sports, just like a simulcast feed, right? I want to be able to go in and choose my own, camera feed. I want to be able to go pick something using the data and then say, I want to delve into clips about the team or the player or the club or the competition or whatever. So I don't necessarily think it's one big innovation stick that we're looking for. I just think it would be nice to close the gap and maybe on the AI theme that I was hoping to avoid, but I'll say it anyway, which is like as the enabler, right? Things that were inherently quite difficult to do or required machine learning or big data practices to achieve, right? The production of highlights clips based on a favorite team or something similar. AI as an enabler will I think help drive some of that forward with a greater level of velocity.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to go back across the room. So there was an announcement just a matter of, well, I guess not hours ago, but just recently, Bending Spoons is making another acquisition. They're acquiring Vimeo. So Mark, I want to ask you, one of the things that CMOS Trango does is advise clients on M&A transactions. The industry has experienced some rather interesting trends in the last few years. There was a frenzied 2021 with lots of acquisitions, but vendor M&A slowed tremendously in 2022 and has remained largely dormant since then. Although there's been some uptick in the past 6 to 9 months, yesterday's news being an example of that. Large service provider M&A seems to have increased quite a lot in 2024. Specifically, I'm thinking Paramount and Skydance. But what are your thoughts about M&A activity in general for this industry for the next 12 to 18 months? What are you seeing and hearing? What should we expect?
Yeah, sure. And we're fortunate, to be sort of in the room, and it is an interesting time. And I don't really think it's just about M&As, is it? Obviously, this is the spin-offs is the buzzword as well this year, particularly. And I think you have to look at, if you go back in history, look at the reasons why these transactions occurred. So did they occur to build audience? Did they occur to build library? Did they occur because a technology provider or a telecom provider wanted to expand and offer more interesting product? And then now you look at today, and we look at the two active spin-offs, and I know that even though the industry is sort of probing Disney to see if there'll be anything happening there, and of course next year we'll see if anything happens, but the reason for those and is not dissimilar for the reason for the acquisitions, which is the ultimate objective to find the best fit for these brands and these properties. And the reality is that some of these network brands just fit better in other corporate places than they are today. And when you go down to the actual talk to the producers that are creating the content, that are connecting with the audience, and you ask them, you know, what do you feel? What you'll often hear is that the strategic intent of the corporate owner doesn't necessarily align with the vision and the intent of those brands, of those networks, to connect with their audiences and the way they want to go to market and the way they want to operate, and the mix and the investment in digital versus linear, which is obviously, we all know, is suffering from eyeballs. You know, it makes a lot of sense. And I think the way that we think about it in the next 12 to 18 months is the industry is going to continue to try brutally to get to the best fit. And that's what's going to be interesting to see as that unravels over the next 12 to 18 months.
So I'm curious. I didn't jot this down. It just occurred to me. So looking back at those these companies that are being spun off, these divestitures now, were the acquisitions that brought them into their current umbrella, were those not the best fit at the time, or has the world changed, or both?
I think both, right? I think that there are some more obvious ones where I think that the leadership team would probably say, well, you know, maybe that didn't go the way we thought, right? Because at the end of the day, audience behavior continues to change, continues to evolve. And so perhaps the early strategies that were put in place that resulted in those transactions years later, when they finally can be effected, the world's moved on. But I think in a lot of cases, I don't think it was around necessarily fixing errors of the past, but accepting what the future is going to be and embracing that in a new world, in a new way, and letting those properties maximize their performance.
Thank you. Julian, I want to ask you about a topic as an industry, we've been talking about for more than 10 years now. And you said something interesting about it that piqued my question. You recently talked about how our industry likes to talk about cloud transformation as if it is half of a binary choice. It's either legacy on-prem or it's running in the cloud. But the reality is often very different, especially for live production. Could you share a little bit about this reality from your customers and what you see and hear from them and how you guide them?
Yeah, okay. So I think in raw numbers, I'd say 80% of our deployments, engagements are cloud hybrid. And it's not a compromise situation. I think, excuse me, a couple of years ago, people would view sort of hybrid deployments as, oh, you couldn't go all cloud, oh, compromise. But I think the business reality is that hybrid, either as a stepping stone to all cloud, as a controlled migration of services from all on-prem and potentially on legacy systems to the cloud over a given period, that's hybrid. It's an eminently sensible approach as well, rather than sort of forklifting services into the cloud with uncontrolled outcomes leads to bad technology choice. Well, it's not a bad technology choice, it's a bad implementation approach. So, yeah, yes, as I say, 80% are hybrid. Of those, I would say half of them are probably going to continue to be hybrid in perpetuity because there's a studio attached to it or some intrinsic reason why some of the capability needs to be on-prem. And the other half are partway through a controlled migration. So that's the reality, really. I should say the other 20% is mainly cloud only, but we do have one or two all on-prems. And as I say, it's not a compromise. I think it's just a business reality. I think going back to the earlier question about good technology, bad technology, cloud is one that could sit in both of those camps. It is absolutely transformationary to our industry, but you've got to go about it correctly. And just running at it and going, oh, we've got to get in the cloud, as if cloud is a strategy in its own right, has led to problems, and people are being more cautious. So again, it comes back to approach, really.
You keep making me think about Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in every, cloud, why? Take each business case in its own right, and go slowly. Go, work in 6-week blocks. Migrate slowly. Please don't set out an 18-month program of work where you're not going to see any earned value for 9 months. Whoa, no. Start small. Prove it out as you go.
All right. So I mentioned that we would talk about AI. So now it's time. Terry, I'm going to start with you. So the Media League is hosting an AI breakfast event this weekend. And your event promo states, we've seen surveys, high-level recommendations, and promising pilots, but not enough hands-on analysis that shows how AI can truly enhance products and workflows. Can you talk a little bit about what's the kind of the deep hands-on analysis that's necessary to make for customers to make meaningful decisions about AI?
Yeah. So first, to give you some background, we launched this AI Square initiative at the Media League, and before we did that, we asked professional analysts, and we asked them, what is on your roadmap for AI? Because those people are supposed to tell you what's the roadmap, what's the weather, is it going to rain, at what time it's going to rain, so they're supposed to do that. And so we got back was polls, nice graphic, Gartner curve, finger wet prediction, and we asked them, but how about what works where, why, and how? We got nothing across 5 different consulting firms. So I said to my co-founder, Fernando, as a marketer, I know what I need to do. I need to debunk this whole, we need to debunk this whole AI thing, ask tough questions, not only to the technology providers, but to the integrators, and the poor operator will have to deal with it without knowing what is inside the box. So that's my view, our view in the Media League on what AI is about. And for me, it's a bit like when we started massive initiative like the cloud one. I remember my CEO at Harmonic saying, you guys have to sell cloud or I will fire you. And the sales guy, they tried and they didn't succeed. They changed the sales guy, and at the end, we had to change the CEO. We tried to sell the company. So you have to be extremely careful when you have a new technology wave. You might have somebody beating you up. You have to sell. You have to sell. You need to know what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. And if possible, with some profitability in sight. Because to burn OpenAI token, I think any stupid monkey can do it. To do something right, to solve a real problem, to expand the business, not only to save costs and to fire the actors, this is a fine art. And we hope in the Media League to hold the flag. We don't have the solution, but at least we can ask the tough questions.
So we come back to start with why. Chris, the vast majority of the conversation around AI for media and entertainment has been about AI as a technology tool, but there are a lot of other really, really important aspects to the AI conversation. You and Nigel Ross each published really interesting blog posts about AI and privacy in sports. Could you share a couple of these emerging privacy concerns and how the industry and ultimately regulators are trying to play catch up?
Yeah. So, I mean, it always feels like a bit of a killjoy talking about that, right? Because it's rule and regulation and we hate it. And it just, there's always this thing of, it's kind of restricting the innovation, but it's real. And I think as Thierry kind of commented, right now it's an AI gold rush. Everyone is just out clambering after anything they can. And nobody's really stopping to think carefully about the implication of what they do. Now, things like GDPR, right? It's not just a regulation for a big organization. It is sometimes double-digit percentage fines of the parent company's revenue, right? So the impact of getting it wrong is severe. And a bit like the introduction of GDPR, right? There's this massive retrospective scramble to go fix the problem. With AI, I think it's a lot harder for a few reasons. One is the problem of scale, right? When you put data into AI solutions, it radiates and permeates out and scales at a level that you just have no control over. The second thing is then permanence, right? This notion that you can just issue a right to be forgotten or a right to removal or I want to stop using my data for processing doesn't translate into that world, right? You know, when an LLM or a model or you know, a multi-AI pipeline is baked, it's baked, right? It's like trying to take an egg back out of the cake. You can't do that. So I think, as Thierry said, people need to stop and think about what happens and the impact, and it will catch up. And you know, sports is that example. You know, when we're going to use AI to do analysis and forward predictions of, you know, of people's sports data, you know, 20 years of a football player's career or something similar, right? And all of a sudden that's not on the table and someone says, hey, you can't use this anymore, right? Look at what happens in the US. You know, organizations now like, you know, Prorata and Perplexity who are waking up and realizing that they have to start doing royalty sharing and revenue sharing, right? It starts in editorial and publication, and it's going to apply now to a lot of other areas where people go, well, I own that, right? That's me. You can't just do with it what you want. And I think the retrospective effort to try to take that and unpick it is going to be a bit of a slow motion car crash. It's going to be really hard.
Definitely food for thought. So, Andy, guess what? We're back to you.
Hooray.
So you also wrote recently about AI models for hyper regionalization. For the vendors in the room that are building AI solutions and for maybe service providers that have a hyper local, multilingual subscriber base, could you share some of your thoughts about how hyper localization might require differentiated architectures or multiple LLMs, et cetera?
So I think the biggest part, and Chris started talking about this earlier because it is what you have built an entire business around, is that data is the fuel for all of this AI. If you have shit data, you're going to have shit AI, period, end of sentence. So the first thing we have to do is fix data in order to make this work. And one of the things that I liked about a lot of your Better Together stories is that it's partners working together on solutions for the customers, which ultimately is what we need to see more of. Because if a partner tries to go solve all the problems themselves, the reality is that they're starting to heavily overlap with partners that are doing the same thing. And you run into this issue where everybody's generating a bunch of data. And then it's like, well, whose data do we use? So take a dependency on someone else's data, or have the ability to take a dependency on someone else's data. Likewise, make it possible for your data to be exportable across it so that we're cutting down some of the silos. And the fewer of those silos and the more ability that we have to commingle that, the quality of the AI capabilities will start to rise, and we will start seeing more of those solutions get built that we're talking about, whether it's hyper regionalization, hyper personalization, customization of the clip, basically this notion of just media as a programmable object, not a bunch of fixed content. We're going to stop making the 30 versions of it that go into the CMS, and we'll have some assets that get just-in-time assembled more.
So that's the last formal question I have. I want to make sure we have time for a couple of questions from the audience and networking, since that's why we're here. So I'm going to ask, starting, Thierry, with you, and we'll work our way this way. In 30 seconds, what's the most interesting thing you would tell people to check out and look for here at IBC? And also, what's a bold prediction for the industry for 2026? You have to look into your crystal ball.
Okay, so one of my pet subjects is internet scalability. If everybody goes unicast, who pays the bill? First topic. AI, we talked about sanity check, why, how, where, how, very important. Last thing, my new venture is in Nakadi, is managed service white label for emerging countries. We are all Western people going to Western world, and we go to emerging country. Doesn't fly at all. So we need to take care of the 40% of the population who live on the other side of the world and try to help those people, hopefully with more modern architecture. And I'm quite open to see OpenMock, which was open yesterday. It's a good sign.
Mark, same question.
Yeah, so rather than anything specific, what I really enjoy with the show is actually kind of taking a look holistically at the vendor landscapes and the clustering and the emerging innovative vendors, the startups, and kind of taking that overall industry view. I find that fascinating. So I highly recommend take a look at the plan, take a look at the guide, and kind of look at what's hot and trending just from a presence perspective. And then I think you asked about predictions for next year. So it's always a dangerous thing to say, isn't it? Someone's going to be like, hey, wait, didn't you say? I actually think next year, I think we're going to see, so back to the sort of mergers, acquisitions, and spin theme, I do think that particularly in the distributors, I think we're going to see some interesting big deals and things next year. I think we're about due a big deal, right? So, so let's see if I'm right or not.
Julian?
Okay. Problems, better together. I think when customers are engaging with vendors at all the stands, bring your problems. It is, we've talked about collaboration between vendor and customer for years. It's never been more important. We like to hear about business problems. Bring the vendors into the problem domain. And then listen to how they would help you, solve a given problem. But then, take a look at the technology, give it a touch and feel, make sure it is going to deliver the objectives for you. Don't buy from PowerPoint. Just bring your problems to the vendors and work together, better together to solve those. I think increasingly it's so important that vendors remain close to the media operators, really.
And what's your prediction?
I'm going to go M&A as well. But vendor side, there's a lot of vendors down on the show floor. I think we're probably overdue some consolidation, and I think there's a couple of areas there. I think some of the big names, their R&D spend has not been as much as it could have been over the last 10 years. And I think that's really showing in their product offerings. And it's very obvious. Equally, maybe some vendors, it's quite a thin wrap around other people's technology. There's quite a lot of product offerings that are very thin veneers over cloud hyperscaler technologies. And I think they can't really carry on like that. So very boring consolidation, vendor side consolidation.
So I want to call back to something you just said about talking to customers, bring your problems to us. So Tony McNamara from Paramount did a presentation at this event 2 years ago. And one of the things, and I think about this all the time, he said to the vendor community, innovate with us, not for us, because you don't know what we need to solve. So Chris, what's the most interesting thing or that you want to see or you would coach us to see, and then your bold prediction?
I mean, the former is easier to answer than the latter, right? So I think the thing over the years that I've been most surprised about is when you go around and look at some of the smaller organizations, right, and the innovation that these guys are offering and demonstrating versus some of the bigger players that we know about. I think, let's be candid, right? The bigger players have an interest of sometimes sort of keeping it safe in terms of what they want to show, right? But I think some of the coolest things I've seen over the years are from some of the smallest partners. And I would say, just go to the board, right? Pick a couple of names in a hall that you've never seen before and just go check out what they're doing, because I think you'll probably be surprised in places. I have been. I was hoping to
So
dodge
you're not
that.
off the hook. Yeah,
Oh, man.
you have to answer the
Wow.
prediction.
Prediction. I don't know. I mean, the consolidation thing is real, right? We're seeing smaller people swallow up larger people, right? What does that tell you? Are those organizations just bloated, right? Is it that you've now got smaller bodies of teams delivering the same thing? I mean, look at like the OB landscape. Great example, right? A colleague and I were talking on the way in. The car park out the front 5 years ago, full of OB trucks, massive everywhere. Now it's just full of loot and vans packing gear around, right? So, I think the consolidation piece is a big part of it. Yeah.
All right, Andy, same 2 questions for you.
Okay. Well, on the M&A piece, the thing I was thinking earlier when we started talking about this was, I think the large distributors generally thought they had till about 2030, 2032 to figure out what the hell they were going to do with the broadcast businesses. And then like last year they found out, oh, actually it's like 2026, 2028. We need to hurry up. And so that's the sudden put everything on an ice flow, get ready to chop the end of the ice flow off and shove it out. So I think it's a couple of things. I think COVID caused them to increase the spend on the sort of the OTT and the remote pieces. We got a lot of fragmentation really quickly. That all collapsed when we all suddenly got back into rooms together. And so now they have to figure out how to pick the parts of the business that they're going to carry on with, and they're going to have to move others. That doesn't mean that, someone's going to take that business and they're going to nurture it, but it's like a plateau hospice style. It's not going to be an innovation of any sort. On the things that I'm most interested in, I think, and nobody has said this one, so I feel excited, and maybe you'll just say I'm wrong. Theory will say I'm wrong. I trust that he will. But I feel like more and more we have the small people, what we would call the creators, coming in and playing a role of a miniature platform for a significant amount of eyeballs and making direct deals with brands that they used to have to go through a studio, or they had to go through a broadcaster, they had to go through the enterprise business to do. And so I think we now will see more of the hyperscalers and the OTT platforms paying attention to it. We see Netflix is making deals directly with creators to come in and do a business. And so I think we're going to see at shows like this, all of the partners will suddenly have a creator version of whatever their solution was, or they're going to have some marketing around how you take that enterprise piece and you use it in a creator platform, because that's going to be the customer.
All right, we're about 8 minutes past where I had planned to be, so we've got time for maybe one or two questions from the audience. Yes, Olga, I bet a colleague that you would be the first one to ask a question. So what is your question? So for everybody in the back, Olga's question was specifically around sports. Do we know what the end customers, the end subscriber wants to see from an innovation standpoint? And she said there was a survey that they did of end viewers and vendors, and the answers that they got were completely different. And what the vendors said that their subscribers wanted was completely different than what the end subscribers wanted, and the end subscribers hated it. So I'll open that.
Yeah. Thanks. So I think that's a really good question. And no more is that evident for me. And look, I'm not known for being uncontroversial, right? But the advertising market is so fundamentally broken. It's obscene, right? And that great example, 1995, Real Networks did the first online stream of a Yankees baseball game. And in 30 years since that, we've seen square root of very little advertising innovation, pre-roll that people don't pay attention to, a post-roll that never gets watched, and if you're ITV, in the moment of a goal, cutting away to a shampoo ad, right? So I feel like the advertising market is a great one. Whereas if you talk to a fan, right, and say, what do you want? They want it discreet, right? They want the ability to do a really nice semi-transparent overlay where they can buy a shirt or sponsor a key moment via a brand and something discreet, rather than massive cutaway experiences. So I totally agree with you that I think we've got technology hijacking, and we come up with mechanisms and tooling and capabilities to deliver server-side, client-side, server-guided, you name it, right? But every one of these different technologies just iterates out the same end consumer experience, and it doesn't change. I agree.
So I'm gonna, before I take a second question, I'll say as a subscriber, the thing that drives me nuts, and I won't say which company this is, but the UI is terrible. If I've been watching a series and I want to go into that app and I want to watch the next in that series, I don't want to have to scroll through all these things like, because Bluen Lagofic is a friend of yours, you probably should watch this. So sorry, Bluen.
Brendan, I would like to make one comment, because I know Olga is very keen on piracy. And I want to give the example of the Ligue 1 in France, which was with DAZN last year. After 1 year, they reached 700K paying subscribers, and nobody can count how many pirates. Came La Ligue Professionnelle, which is the league, In 1 month, by reducing the price, they reach 1 million subs. No tech stack thing, which is very old, very ancient. So if you want to get the eyeballs, if you don't understand the purchasing power of your customers, you need to change job.
All right. I want to preserve your time for networking and for everybody in the front row. Remember, when you do go back there to get a drink, say that it's on me. So thank you, huge thank you to our panelists, if you would please.